Right, welcome back. We're glad to have you back on TVC Breakfast this Monday morning. Now, for years, electricity consumers across Nigeria have complained bitterly over the estimated billing system used by the power distribution companies, describing it as an outrageous billing method used to rip them off.
Well, to resolve the conflict between distributors and consumers over tariff collection, the federal government has approved a 39 billion naira loan to electricity distribution companies known as DISCOs for the supply of meters.
The gesture, according to the Minister of Power Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, was part of the power sector recovery program of the government. He says this move will ensure that every consumer of electricity is provided with a meter.
We have improved generation capacity now. As at the 10th of August, the available power now is 6,863 megawatt. The available transmission capacity is 6,700 megawatt. But we now have a new problem. The DISCOs can't take the power because the equipment are aging, they don't have the resources. So again, this is good and it's bad. It's good because our policy of the payment assurance guarantee for gas and GENCOs has clearly started taking effect since it was passed. So generation is going up.
We have got this declaration of eligible customer, which the minister has declared according to the Power Sector Reform Act. And the NAC is working on the operational guideline to see how the operation can take place. And even on our side, for the side of TCN, in deploying those investments that we are doing, we speak to each and every of the distribution companies, and we ask them to tell us where they want capacity, which we are putting, and that is how we are working to see how we can increase the load.
The problem with the power sector is not about generation of power, but about distributing it. Well, joining us is a political and social affairs analyst, Achike Chude. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Yes. Do you see this now as a cheery news, talking about the 39 billion naira loan to be given to DISCOs to, disburse meters to customers?
I don't want to sound pessimistic. I mean, it's an effort, so we have to acknowledge that. But it is also an effort that clearly is not indicative of the right kind of response to the gravity of the situation. And this is very clear. The impression one has is that now all homes in Nigeria are going to be metered, and then the tensions that have arisen as a result of this arbitrary, charge, consumers would go down. Not exactly so, because the minister himself, some time ago, I think at a lecture at the University of Lagos, had indicated that 220 billion naira was needed to meter every home in this country. 220 billion naira. So you have about 11 DISCOs. So 20 billion naira for each DISCO. So that translates to just about maybe 2 DISCOs. Taking all of these monies. So what it tells you is that this is just a tip of the iceberg, and they would not achieve required results in terms of the number of consumers that it is going to affect positively. That should translate to maybe about 12% of all consumers. So we still have a very big problem in the country. But beyond that again is the fact that it's amusing. It's really amusing in an ironical way to see government enhancing private business in the country continuously.
Yeah, you took that question right out of my mouth. There are people who are already, raising the eyebrow and saying, look, if the power sector has been privatized, what business does government have giving them this huge sums of money? Of course, they'll be in tranches.
Yes, I think about two years back, I think there was about over 200 billion given to them. Thank you. And then the 701 billion naira that was given to them not too long ago, they called it an intervention fund. And then this 39 billion naira again to, like I said, enhance private business, ownership in the country. And you want to ask yourself, if it had been, the previous status of the energy corporation in this country, NEPA under
PHCN.
the old NEPA, would the government have made this kind of commitment, to that running, to a public institution that belongs to the government? And so, people begin to ask questions about really the intention of privatization, really. And people, ultimately, the conclusion is that these enterprises are deliberately run down in order to privatize them, so that people within the polity would, take up ownership of this infrastructure. And having taken ownership of this infrastructure based on forced business, premises, they now seek recourse to the government to also take public funds also to run their private, enterprise.
The mind-boggling issue of it all is that, especially the discos, have not been able to, perform at par. Be able to distribute all the energy Gencos have been generating in the past. In fact, Gencos accused them through the TCN of saying that they were even told to stop generating power for Nigerians at a point.
The thing is that they are beset with myriads of issues, and of course you cannot take your eyes away from the foundation of even this privatization itself, which was mired in some forms of controversy. And so we are seeing the manifestation of some of these foundational issues, and it's very clear that these arguments have been revolving all this while. We've had these arguments, for a very long time. That yes, even before it was taken over. But the reality again is that they did not take over, an enterprise that they were not aware of. They did not take over an enterprise that they did not do a proper audit of. They did all of these things. You understand? And having seen, what was on ground, having seen the assets on ground, having seen the liabilities on ground, they decided to take over these, entities. And so all of these things that we're hearing today are just plain excuses that they are giving to us. All we're interested in is to ensure that they live up to, the promises that they have made. For instance, the issue exactly
on whose part now?
No,
the discos, the
Gencos, excuses on the part of the private, enterprise, the private entities, and excuses on the part of government that kept on telling us at all times that they cannot continue to fund public enterprises that are not doing well financially. They cannot keep on sinking government money into a bottomless pit. That has always been the basis of this, privatization scheme. Now government is giving us excuses, putting more money to privatized, assets, and then the private enterprises themselves are giving us excuses and the rest. And of course, even this issue of a prepaid meter, there was an MOU, I think in 2014, a clear understanding, that within 24 months, which they signed, within 24 months, that they will be able to meter homes in the country. This is 36 months after they have not been able to do that.
Well, so, the minister said that they even had to charge the contractor, the meter contractor, to court. The case is not in court at the moment, just to get that out.
No, it has been discharged. And this was an issue, I think, prior to the privatization. I think there was some kind of understanding when they set out on this issue of privatization. Yes, I know. In 2003, I think, they were supposed to have provided some money, about maybe 39 billion naira and so on, which somehow they were unable to do, which constituted, from what they are saying, a breach. The government was taken to court, and there was a judgment debt, of about 119 billion naira, on the government. From what we have been told, they have gotten into discussion with all of this one, decided to set apart the judgment debt, and agreed to refund, to fund again, go back to the 37, I think about 37 billion naira initially, that was agreed upon in 2003. So that judgment debt has been set aside. It is no longer a problem for the government. You understand?
So now, how do we begin to unravel this problem? Now, the power sector recovery program of the federal government, how confident are you that it will actually solve this power problem? The discos are saying the cost reflective tariff is at the root of the problem. Then there is the issue of metering on the other hand. How do we get over this so that we don't start celebrating 6,000 megawatts and all of that, which Nigeria is doing?
You see, I don't know what they mean by cost reflective tariff. I think that is just another word of exploitation, because that is what is going on. Nigerians have been exploited since this situation happened. And the reality is that from, the process of generation of, a certain quantum of energy to people's homes, a lot of energy is lost in the process. And now what is happening is that the ordinary people are made to pay for the loss of this energy. You understand? Maybe, for instance, if they are generating about 6,000 and in the process of distributing to homes, they lose about 2,000 of this energy.
It comes at a cost.
It comes at a cost to the people
and
who
Nigerians
have no
to
business
pay
paying for these losses. So this is part of it. And even as it is right now, Nigeria is paying, Nigerians or Nigerian consumers are being charged perhaps maybe the highest in terms of, in Africa for energy, energy per unit used.
And that's why
in typical
the
Nigerian
past,
homes.
many have said that the fact that discos even refused to meter all homes with prepaid meters, as it were, could be a sabotage.
No, it is a sabotage. Yeah.
Easiest way for them to get more money.
Yeah,
and services
it's not even. Let's use the right word. Stealing. They are stealing from the people. They are, taking money illegally from the people. It is an act of 419. We have made it clear because I have been involved with different communities, Mafoluku, Oshodi, Ajawo estates, and so on, in protests over these arbitrary charges, on Nigerian consumers, which is very, very unfair. And it has been the same situation. Houses that should be paying on average about 2,000, 3,000 naira per month are being charged 20,000 naira. And that is part of it because the issue of not being able to provide prepaid meters to homes is deliberate, because they know what they are going to lose in the process of providing. But
the discos will tell you that it doesn't pay them not to meter Nigerians.
Of course, it has paid them all this while. Like they're going to return the monies that they have been charging consumers. Of course, they've been getting so much money illegally from consumers. It pays them clearly. There are no two ways about it. That is just political talk. Because now the pressure is on them. From Lagos to Potiskum to Enugu to Abeokuta, Onitsha and the rest, in Benin, people are rising up in protest that they cannot continue. I think the people now understand what is going on and have risen up in protest against, and that's why you see the federal government, for instance, reacting to this issue by giving these people all kinds of money, for all kinds of intervention.
Of course, but there was an instruction.
Them, yes.
Yeah, there was an instruction to Nigerians just a few months ago that if you do not get power supply,
if you don't get the meter,
don't pay.
That was for maximum. Yes,
you had discos saying that it wasn't realistic.
That was for maximum demand.
Customers.
Yes, customers and so on. And of course, it's clear. If you look at the number of people, the population, and so I think it was a political talk again to give people the impression that we are truly concerned about what is happening. Because what happens to the vast majority of Nigerians if it's about maximum demand customers or consumers who are very few compared to the general population in the country. So it was about trying to give people the impression that government is really concerned about their problem by looking at a very small segment of the consumer section of this country and neglecting the entire consumers. Because that question, and I think one of your programs you did ask that question, that statement should have reflected on every consumer in this country, whether you are running offices or residencies, or whether you are running a big companies using maximum demand meters.
Okay, so what do you make of when the federal government says discos don't have exclusivity over distribution areas? Make us understand that. Does it mean that other players can actually operate in that?
What we have,
field,
you see, people tend to look at the network providers, at the GSM network providers, and use it as a basis to judge or to compare what is going on. But from the very initial stage, we told them it was a completely different scenario because these people simply brought their money into the country, invested their monies and all of that. What they did in Nigeria, with the power in the power sector was completely different. So you do not have monopolies, issue of monopolies, for instance, with the GSM, providers. If you are dissatisfied with one, they have set a process in motion for you to quickly switch from this network to the other network. I think it's called porting.
Yes.
And so that makes it easier. But here we have total monopoly, in the supply and distribution of energy.
Do we need to break that monopoly? Is that what may likely solve the problem?
No monopoly is good, especially if it's in the hands of the private sector, because do not forget that they are forever driven by the need for greater profit. You understand? That is the essence of the monopoly. So when you have issues with them, even if it is legitimate, in most cases you can never win any case against them, because what they do is that they will just come in. You don't want to play ball according to their own dictate. They will just come there and disconnect you. But if you had proper competition, they know that they have to sit up because you simply move to the next energy provider.
Exactly.
Yes.
And Nigerians clamored for that in the past, especially at the privatization stage. Now, of course, before power gets to the final consumer, it starts from the generating set, that's the GenCos, and then gets to the transmission companies, which people are not even looking at. And of course, they are bedeviled with so many challenges. We had so many times in the past of having the problem of dilapidated structures to transmit power from the GenCos to the discos. But we are not even looking at that. So if Nigerians get metered now, and then GenCos still churn out about 6,000 megawatts, which is of course way below the expected power generation per year. What about the TCN?
Yeah, you know, let's also just go back to the minister's statement about generating 6,000 megawatts and all of that. You must remember the times we are in now. This is the rainy season. So let us not make that from the Yaradua administration to the Jonathan administration, you know, this present administration and so on. Within specific periods of the year, we have very large quantum of energy, you know, that is generated and so on. You know, yes, we have issues with actually distributing them along the power lines, you know, all the way to homes and the rest. Because like I said, somewhere along the line, a lot of energy is lost. But what happens, the true test, yes.
But people are not saying that. And the government is somehow responsible.
Still holding on to
responsible for TCN.
Well,
the fault is still on the part of the government.
No, well, the government has told us that they are investing. I mean, they keep on investing and all of that. But the reality, you know, that even beyond that, there are very serious issues. Because again, I keep on saying that there was an audit of what was needed. Even if you wanted to say, look, we are going to start with the distribution companies and all of that, we are still going to be involved with some form of generation and transmission and so on. They sat down and they had a holistic look at all of these things, and they knew the implications of what they wanted to do. So all of these things that we're seeing are just complaints, as far as I'm concerned, you know, for inefficient, to justify inefficiency and ineptitude. All we want, because we are paying fully. There is no time. I mean, if you don't pay, they will come in there and then disconnect you.
The customer
and we
is
are
king.
also, the customer is supposed to be king, but not in Nigeria. But we're also telling people, because we can also recognize the fact that you have energy theft. You have people who are also using energy that they are not paying for. But nobody is saying, even while we clamor for the right thing to be done and for people, you know, not to be charged arbitrarily, you know, in terms of energy distribution, we are also saying that they also need to up their ante and ensure that this power theft, whether from consumers and so on, is also something that they can avoid. We can also not support that. So there are issues, but essentially, what this thing is telling us is the entire privatization scheme was not clearly thought out. You know, and that's why
there have been calls for a review of the whole process of privatization.
And the reality is that a lot of people are even going back to the past and remembering that, look, perhaps I think, you know, that NEPA as it was then, with even the kind of very low funding that they were getting from the federal government, it's much better than what we are experiencing today in terms of energy generation and distribution.
And you wonder why the
and
government is not pumping money on TCN for them to function well, and why discos that we understand are in private hands.
Yeah, I also want to, because you see, there's a synergy, there's a relationship between generation, transmission, and distribution, and so on. So I want to believe that if the federal government, for instance, is already helping out the private enterprises with huge sums of funds, I don't want to believe that they are not doing anything, because they themselves, the discourse will tell you, the generating companies will also tell you that there is no way you can, you know, put money in one and not put money in the other one, because it's a chain. They are all connected.
But it looks like the TCN remains the weakest link in this chain of power distribution. Now, Serap had gone to court in June to compel the Ministry of Works and Housing, of course, and Power, Babatunde Fashola, and of course the discos to provide meters to all Nigerians. We're talking about metering and all of that. The minister himself has called on the discos to provide meters for Nigerians, and yet the discos are not.
There's something that the federal government should be doing.
Impunity, or there's nothing you really can do.
We have had court judgments also in the past in this country that made it very clear about what the discos should be doing and not doing. But of course, you realize that this thing was obeyed. I mean, the court order was obeyed in the breach. You know, so there's something that the government should be doing that I also think that they are not doing. There should be some kind of supervision, which NEC is supposed to be doing. I don't know how. I do not think they have been doing that effectively, because you see, so much money is being generated every month, and I can tell you that what some of these you know, discos are generating is about 1,000 times more than they were generating before now. So much more money is coming into the discos. But what are they doing with that money? And that is what where you would expect the NEC to do, to sit down with these, energy companies, find out this discourse, find out why they are not meeting up with their obligations, go through their books. Because there's also a possibility that the monies that they are generating is ending up in the wrong hands because of the skewed nature of ownership of this discourse. From the very beginning, there has always been this speculation that principal people within government and their friends are the owners of some of this discourse. And that's why, for instance, I remember I was watching, your previous interview on the ASO strike,
yes.
and the problem of state of Nigerian universities. And you also realize a team that runs through some of these issues. The fact that at this particular point in time, there's a bill before the National Assembly, to try and see, to ensure that funds, public funds, fought for by ASO, that is the third fund, is also used to fund private-owned universities in this country. Now, who are the owners of these universities? They are, again, people who have been connected with governance in this country one way or the other. So you also see them sitting back.
All right, let's so that we don't lose focus on the power sector that we're discussing. It seems that the power sector, at the point of privatization, not enough research was conducted for example, for them to know the number of households are in Nigeria. And then the minister talked about data in the past saying that there are about 6 million households to be metered. And he's saying now that that is even faulty, because if you meter 6 million households for a country of 180 million people.
And there are other reports too that talk about 3 million households to be metered. So what do we make of this for a population as huge as ours?
It still simply tells you something about the nature of governance and political leadership in the country. And it's not about this administration, even previous administrations.
So there's a tendency to lack thoroughness in...
But clearly, I mean, we had instances in the past, even during the last administration, where the Minister of State, for the economy, Minister of State for Finance, makes a statement that is a day later controverted, by the Minister of Finance. We've also had this issue even with this government. So data gathering, statistics and so on has always been an issue in this country. And so you cannot make proper planning, for instance, if you do not have all the relevant data. And that, again, might be part of the problem they're having. But then again, they were also in a hurry. They couldn't wait. I mean, after calculating the number of Nigerians you have and the amount of money, for instance, that could be generated from, tasking consumers, so they were in a hurry to quickly grab all of this infrastructure without the proper due diligence being done. And I think that maybe that, to a very, very large extent, is also part of their problem. But they had the opportunity to bring in consultants, bring in experts. If we couldn't, the Nigerian experts couldn't do it, bring in foreign experts and all of that, do the relevant, research, and come up with the right kind of methodology and approach.
Because they thought the gains were going to be way higher than the challenges they met.
I think it's like the typical 419er that begins to spend this money even before the deal has been done. So they had looked at what they were going to generate, and I think they kept their eyes on that and forgot to do all the other things, and that is why today they are in trouble. But unfortunately, the problem with this is that it is Nigerians that are the receiving end once more, as usual, with this kind of...
And paying for darkness.
Indeed, paying for darkness. We've spent some 11 trillion. Nigerians have had to bear the cost, apart from the 16 billion or so. According to SERAP.
How much does education need? And how much, other levels of...
Very good question. But can we shy away from the fact that discos have been crying themselves hoarse that government is owing them upwards of 800 billion in some cases, and Nigerians fail to pay their electricity bills when it is required? Are we all contributing to the problem that we have with the power sector today?
Look, I do not think that there's any law, that will be in support of a Nigerian that consumes electricity and refuses to pay for that. So I do not think that we should hold Nigerians liable or responsible for the inability of the discos to collect on the debts that they are being owed by Nigerians. You understand? They have the infrastructure. And like I said, the law enforcement agents, for as long as they are right, would be on their side. So let them devise methods to collect monies that they are being owed. Yes, I agree that government institutions also owe them and the rest. Perhaps that is a price that they are also paying for wrongly entering, you know, into the deal by not doing what they should do.
All right, thank you very much for your analysis. Achike Chude, your political and, of course, social affairs analyst. Thank you for coming to the studio.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.